Hello and welcome back to another JoJo and Joe show here at the Two Joes podcast. We are coming at you from the Salt Lake City Valley, talking UFOs with my lovely co-host JoJo.
Good morning. How is everybody?
We are going through the Basement Office here on YouTube. It's the show put on by the New York Post. They're talking about UFOs. They did the research, and it's just fun for us to watch the show, add our comments, share our experiences and insight, and theorize and postulate and all that fun stuff. So if you have been listening to these podcasts, I hope you're enjoying them. Please leave a comment, give us a like, all that other good stuff. All right, so
today, dun dun dun, I'm really excited about this. Although I've never had one of these experiences myself, we are talking about alien abductions today.
This is like Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, I believe.
Okay, so the first kind is that you see them.
Right.
The second kind
physical evidence
is that you have
behind.
Physical evidence. The third kind is
you see an alien.
You see an alien and a craft.
Yeah.
Okay. The fourth kind is the alien interacts with you. And the fifth kind is the alien takes you on its ship.
Something like that. Yeah.
Got it. Well, if I'm right, I got it.
We're close. We're in the ballpark.
You know me, I'm usually right, so just accept that. Just kidding. All right, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, so this is episode 11 of The Basement Office, Alien Abduction, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, and more. All right, let's begin.
One of the skeptical theories is that these people are attention-seeking, or they're in it for fame and fortune. Well, not sure there's too much fame or a lot of fortune to be had. They're speaking out more because they're looking for answers, I think. If you have an experience like that, and you genuinely believe you've had that experience, part of you will say, maybe I'm going crazy.
Well, I just flipped out. I became hysterical.
Because it's one thing to say that you've seen a UFO. It's quite another to say that you've been on board one.
Throughout our pop culture, there are countless scary movies.
That's true.
TV shows.
They're here.
Stories of aliens kidnapping humans.
Great.
Conducting
Nice.
invasive experiments.
Let's make it as scary as possible. Ooh,
They need these viewers and the
Oh my
clicks.
goodness.
and leaving them permanently haunted from the experience.
But really,
I see you.
people are permanently haunted because they can't talk about it.
I don't think I like this.
Or they're unwilling to.
But beyond these examples of science fiction entertainment, there are real people who claim this is really happening.
Abducted by aliens.
Being abducted by aliens is not so far-fetched, and many people say they have been.
I was abducted by something. I don't know what it was or where it was from.
She claims to have boarded a spaceship when she was 7.
And while it's impossible to prove and validate these incredible claims, the stories remain, continue, and have become urban legends. Today, we will analyze Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind.
Fourth
Alien Abduction.
Alien Abduction.
Welcome to the Basement Office.
Okay, fourth kind, alien abduction.
Third kind is that they see an alien and a ship.
Yeah.
Second kind is physical evidence. First kind is sight.
Fifth kind is communication.
When I say the phrase, abducted by aliens, alien abduction, most people have heard that before in various ways throughout pop culture, movies,
And
television,
they have various reactions
music,
to it.
books, all
Like I
forms
have a
of
friend who
entertainment.
refuses to even
And it's through
discuss
that
aliens
lens, an admission
at all.
that as a journalist there is no way I could prove alien abduction is real. By the end of this episode, we're not going to offer much of anything new to prove that alien abductions are real, but what we are acknowledging today is the fact that the concept of a close encounter of the fourth kind, an abduction, a kidnapping by an alien presence, is part of the zeitgeist of our pop culture. And we are going to acknowledge that through certain cases that have become part of folklore in this country, part
See,
of urban legend.
he's really making it
Like to start
untrue in all those statements. Can you
1961
pause it for a
The
second?
grandfather.
Yeah.
He's acting like every single one of those encounters was done without the permission of the human. I bet you there's some out there where the human said, hey, I want this to happen, please. And they obliged. In fact, I have a friend that happened with.
She kind of sent out a message that she wanted to be visited?
The person that we would like to invite on the show, arranged it for her. So she said, hey, this is what I want.
She saw them.
It wasn't an abduction. It was a volunteer. This is what I would like to do. Do you think you can help me out with it?
Huh.
And my other friend helped her out with it.
You know, I was telling you the other day that I found this Gulf Breeze UFO sighting documentary on YouTube. And I just finished watching it last night. And he was talking about some doctor turned ufologist who developed a way of reaching out to the aliens, a meditation, so to speak. Communicating with them, yeah. And so it's not unheard of. I mean, she's not the only one doing this, evidently.
Yes, and it's voluntary, and it's requested, and it's not all these words that you use, abduction. I mean, there you go. The lizard brain is automatically engaged.
Yeah, true.
And some of these
you can't
sounds
deny
like the people are taken by surprise.
Yeah, you can't deny that shit's going down. That one guy got hit with the freeze ray from the gun, and they're not entirely benign, these aliens, when they come into contact with us.
Well, he wasn't harmed.
No, that's true.
Are any of these people permanently harmed other than by their thoughts about what happened?
Well, that remains to be seen, too. That one guy, didn't he have some device implanted in him that they could see in the X-ray?
Ooh, let's watch.
Remember that one?
I do not.
I thought we covered that on the podcast, but I watch so many of these things. Maybe I'm getting confused.
I have not seen this one before, so let's watch.
Well, yeah, let's see.
See what they have to say.
Of them all, the many ways, the genesis of the idea of being abducted by aliens, the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Well, this is September 1961. Betty and Barney Hill are driving back home late at night and claim that they see a light in the sky. And it's kind of a little bit spooky, seems to be following them. I guess it's a classic UFO encounter. And they get home and they say that two odd things happen. First, they find that their journey took longer than it should have done. And this is a route they were familiar with. There was a period of unaccounted for time, missing time. It's like something happened and maybe their memory edited it out. The second thing that happened was that they started having flashbacks, dreams, suggesting that something else had happened during that sighting. Something they were somehow forgetting part of the story. And this got really troubling. And then they went and they met a doctor who specialized in hypnotic regression. And he regressed them. And under regression hypnosis emerged this story that, look, this wasn't just a UFO sighting. They say that this thing actually took them on board the craft. They were abducted by aliens.
I spoke with Betty's niece, who was alive and in the room as a young girl when Betty and Barney first called and said that they had experienced this. She remembers being a little girl and her aunt and uncle telling this story just right after this experience. Let's cut to her and see what she has to say.
My name is Kathleen Martin, and Betty and Barney Hill were my aunt and uncle. I was 13 years old when this happened.
So you remember that day, in your memory, you remember Betty calling?
Yes, Betty called my mother, who was her sister. I was home from school that afternoon, and it was so shocking to me that I remember it very well.
At that point, was Betty saying they saw something, or was Betty saying we were taken?
Betty was talking about a close encounter with an unconventional craft. They remembered immediately that Barney saw figures on that craft that he described as being clothed in black, shiny uniforms. And almost immediately, she and Barney heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of their 1957 Chevy. The next thing they knew, as if only a moment had passed. They were 35 miles down the highway. They didn't know how they got there. And then they drove on home, and they found evidence that something unexplained and unexplainable had occurred to them. Betty's dress was torn in several places. Barney's shoes were so deeply scraped that he had to buy new shoes. The watches they were wearing that night had stopped running and never ran again.
It was suggested to Betty and Barney Hill that they call the local Air Force base about their encounter. And here is the official U.S. Air Force report regarding Betty and Barney Hill's UFO. Their testimony of the sighting is recorded. It's regarded as a strange incident. The subject of the report is unidentified flying object. The report states that radar did indeed pick up an unidentified flying object that night, but that it was a weak return and it could have been a false reading.
Yeah, of course.
It also states that while there are some inconsistencies in the story, Barney Hill's, quote, honesty and seriousness appear to be valid. But there was no official final conclusion as to what they had seen that night. At what point
insufficient data for evaluation? Ha ha.
Yeah, let's pause there and talk about what we've got so far.
So their conclusion, the official Air Force conclusion, is insufficient data for, well, now I can't remember what it said. Insufficient data for evaluation.
Yeah, which
means let's just throw this out because we don't understand it.
Which is better than what they could have done, because up on the top they had check boxes for weather balloon, swamp gas, you know. They could have called it one of those things, and the radar picked up something that night. Was it a glitch?
But it was weak, so we can throw it out.
Yeah,
you know, there's always this plausible
something.
deniability.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's why it's so hard to pin down this stuff.
And I think that's why these experiences are so traumatic for people when they really don't need to be.
That's part of it, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
But to be abducted, to have your shoes messed up, your watch stops working,
your dress torn.
I mean, that's kind of chilling stuff.
But they haven't talked about what they actually remembered with the hypnotist yet, have they?
No, not yet.
So I'm interested to hear
that. That was pretty much all just talking with the niece and what she remembered. It was profound enough that it made an impact on this 13-year-old girl that she never forgot the incident, the call that was made to her mom that night.
Yes, she was a child. Her mind was more open. She wasn't as bound by societal judgments yet.
Also, you know, memories are formed in those really high energy times.
Yes.
So,
and young children are just like sponges, and they sop that kind of stuff up
so there was
without all the judgments.
There was something going on that night.
Yeah.
There was intensity in the air. You know, it was not
Good
just
for her.
some little...
Yeah.
Oh, they got abducted, no big deal, or they saw something weird. No, this was... seriousness was going on.
Yeah. And, you know, it's really standard procedure for people that have had traumatic events happen and they don't remember them, is when they're ready to go under hypnosis and begin to remember them. That's a standard procedure.
Yeah, you
for
have
trauma.
a little bit of experience or knowledge about hypnosis, and I think they had a specific name for this kind of hypnosis, regression,
because you're
hypnosis.
going back to the incident and you're seeing what you can see. You're, in a sense, reliving it without using your conscious mind.
Did you ever hear the doctor that they mentioned, this Simon dude?
I've never heard of him.
Okay, because I know you've heard of others.
Like he specializes in
and isn't there some
therapy.
Yeah, isn't there some, you know, there's always skeptics who say, oh, you're just implanting memories, they're, you know, you're conjuring
Well,
up.
the ones that are professionals, that's, you know, against the law, so.
I mean, how can we be sure that the hypnotist didn't plant stuff and didn't suggest stuff, and you know?
Well, you know, that is an ethical question. How can we be sure the surgeon didn't leave 5 sponges in you? I don't know. You know, do they show up on X-ray? Maybe they do.
Do they biodegrade?
How can you trust anybody?
That's true.
You know, hopefully they picked someone that they researched that they figured had his ethics and wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, and maybe they'll talk more about it. Hopefully they will here coming up.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, let's get back to it.
To remember their abduction.
Betty had a series of dreams that began 10 days after the event. They happened very early in the morning just as she was waking up, and she wondered if they might be real. Barney simply developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and we attempted to help Betty and Barney as a family to find answers.
What brought on the hypnosis? At what point does someone go, hey, you guys should be hypnotized?
Barney ended up taking a leave of absence from work. He had developed high blood pressure, bleeding ulcers, post-traumatic stress disorder, wasn't able to sleep. He was very traumatized by all of this. And so Dr. Benjamin Simon was recommended. The hypnosis sessions began in 1964, early 1964.
And I bet they audio recorded them. That's
hypnosis sessions were, or at least partly recorded. There is audio, correct?
Ha!
Yes, they were recorded on audio tape.
I don't know where we are. I don't even know how we got here.
They took me and carried me up this ramp. God, I'm scared.
They're taking me up to the object. I don't want to go on it. I don't want to. I don't know what's going to happen if I go on it. I don't want to go.
Through separate hypnosis sessions, Betty and Barney remembered in clear detail having their car halted by men standing in the road. Barney realized these were the same ones he saw on the craft. Betty became hysterical at this point. She had never been so frightened in her life. She opened the door to the car and was going to run into the woods and hide. She was intercepted before she could do this. Barney opened the car door. He stepped out, and he was taken. He and Betty were escorted down a path through the woods onto a craft. Betty fought. This is how her dress was torn. Barney could feel the toes of his shoes bumping along the rocks. This is what caused the damage to his shoes. They were taken to separate examining rooms on the craft where they were given separate examinations. The non-human entities were very interested in their skeletal structure, in their nervous system, in their skin, in what was inside their mouths, inside their ears. Skin scrapings were taken. Hair samples were taken.
And he takes a nail into my nails. And I'm crying and I tell him it's hurting, it's hurting, it's hurting. Take it out.
All right.
Intense.
And now they're showing a picture of a memorial to the Betty and Barney Hill incident.
That's real recording. That was intense. Yeah. And, why needles? Why scrapings? Why do the aliens do this? Do you have any theories on that?
Well, what do we do? What do we do to the indigenous people of the world, right? We want to find out about them. What do we do to animals?
Yeah, that's true.
We capture them. They're freaked out. We take scrapings and hair samples. We do the exact same thing.
Interesting.
This is obviously a race of aliens that is more human-like in that they don't have as much empathy. Okay.
I was going to get to the empathy question because you've mentioned this before, and I was going to say something like, okay, well, how does this scraping and needle poking promote empathy?
It doesn't at all. It sounds like this literally was an abduction, and they did medical testing because they want to find out about humans. They want to learn more about humans, but they're like humans. That this is what humans do.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then I'm going to drop back. Well, aliens have been around forever, throughout history, maybe even ancient times. Haven't they already done this? How many times do they need to do this?
Well,
different doctrines,
you have to
different
realize if you look out in space, there's so much out there. We have no clue. Maybe each time it's a different race of aliens that comes and wants to check us out. You know, I know for a fact
their
that
own
humans
studies.
are quite unique in the universe.
Cross-analysis.
And so we attract the aliens, the ones that have the ability to come here, right? Do.
Okay, so...
Because it's one of the most interesting places to come, and so if they can get permission, they do. I do believe that there is so many alien races interested in humans that they've turned us into a sort of national park, and you have to have, you know, a permit to come down and do whatever you're going to do.
I like that theory. That's a good one. You know, I think you said it was us that was the attraction, humans, but I think it's more the planet, perhaps, because I bet you they do the same kind of things to animals. You know, they want animal scrapings, animal testing, and stuff like that.
Perhaps.
But, you know,
True.
they probably just take the animals and never put them back on the earth. You know, humans, it's a little more delicate, perhaps.
Well, I don't know. You know,
But the cattle mutilations is a thing, too.
It depends on how the race defines consciousness, you know, and how they look at that and how precious do they think it is. If it's a sentient being, are you going to do that to it or not? Well, do you have empathy or not? You know, so I think that there's some kind of a balance being maintained by some kind of an authority in the universe so that the Earth doesn't get destroyed by all this attention.
Another interesting theory.
Yes.
I like that. Well, this recording sent chills up my spine, very intense.
And I want to ask you why.
Why what?
Why did you get chills up your spine?
Needles, perhaps? I'm not a big needle fan. I know what you're trying to do. I'm not going to let you do it to me just yet.
All right, fine. Okay, let's listen.
Here we go.
He does not like
in
needles.
New Hampshire, where this took place, there was actually a sign, a historical sign, an official historical sign. Here on this road is where Betty and Barney Hill experienced their alien abduction or their alien encounter. It's fascinating to me that despite there being no traditional evidence, physical evidence, smoking gun evidence of this case, that it is still deemed a historical event by the state of New Hampshire, by universities, that they recognize the historical cultural aspect this case had.
Well, I think that's right, that whether you believe this happened in a literal, physical sense or not, and of course opinions are divided on that, there's no denying that it is part of pop culture, and so thus it is historically significant. This case, after all, is the ground zero of the alien abduction phenomenon. If you were a skeptic, you would say this is the case that led to lots of copycats. Right. And if you're a believer, you'd say this is the case that encouraged other people who had or were going to have these experiences to speak out because they felt that maybe they weren't alone with this after all.
Good point.
Let's move on from Betty and Barney to 1975. Another pop culture event happens with Travis Walton. And for those of you who have seen the movie Fire in the Sky, I saw when I was 12 and scared the crap out of me. Set up Travis's story.
Well, Travis is a logger, and he and a group of loggers are clearing an area of forest up near Snowflake, Arizona. And they say that they see a UFO at extremely close range. And Travis, being, I guess, the sort of bad boy of the group, approaches this object, and his testimony, and the testimony from the other people in the group, is that a beam of light then strikes him, comes from the UFO, hits him, sends him flying, and they think he's dead. And they just hightail it out of there. They drive away at high speed, and eventually when they stop panicking, they say, no, we've got to go back for him. They go back, he's gone. They head back into town, and what to do? So they kind of relay this story, and the local sheriff's department think that they've murdered him.
Right, obviously.
But they stick to their story that there was this UFO encounter, and these people are seriously being questioned with the view that they might have killed him.
Right.
So if this was a prank of some sort, this is the time to fess up to it.
Right.
Say, no, he's okay.
When the police is accusing you of
somewhere.
murder,
yeah,
then you're like, okay, it was just a joke, right?
5 days later, he turns up again. Disorientated, disheveled, not exactly sure what's going on, with only patchy memory of
5 days later, my
what has
God.
happened. And at that point, well, that's huge relief. At least they haven't killed him, so they're off the hook on.
You obviously didn't kill this guy because there he is.
Yeah.
He's acting weird, but there he is. You didn't kill him. Great.
And he sticks to his story. Right. And he sticks to his story to this day, which is that after he was struck by this light beam, he was taken on board the craft.
Oh, you were on board the craft. You remember that? Yes. What do they want with you? I don't know.
He described 3 entities, quite short, disproportionately large heads again, and huge eyes, and they were wearing some sort of one-piece orange jumpsuit. And he says he fought with them. He struggled. He was afraid. He fought them. And this went on until a human-looking, maybe human-looking entity, who knows, but came and led him out of that confrontational situation into another part of the craft to calm him down. And then some other human, or apparently human beings
can we pause it here?
Some sort of clear...
Okay, so this supports my theory, right? That there's regulations, right? So the away team went and abducted him, and then they were trying to calm him down, but it didn't work. So you had a different type of alien come in, and probably one that has empathy and help to calm him down. Okay, now let's keep going. So this supports my theory that there's some kind of a hierarchy for these aliens interacting with humans, so that they don't just leave us like flayed cows.
Well, and like maybe they learned their lesson from the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. Like, hey, these people don't want to be abducted, and they're going to freak out. So we need to calm them down. So this is how they did it in this case. They a human-looking alien, or led him out of the room by his elbow gently, normal-looking, so less panic, right? Maybe soft tones were playing or something like that. In that Gulf Breeze documentary I watched the other day, it was a similar type of deal. They started flashing pictures in his mind to calm him down, and one of the pictures they showed him were puppies.
Aww. See? They're learning.
They're learning. They have empathy. At least these aliens did.
Some of them did.
Yes, these aliens did. Betty and Barney Hill's abductors could have done a better job of calming them down from the recording I heard.
Yes, definitely. All right,
fascinating
let's keep going.
stuff.
This is very good stuff.
Yeah.
Plastic mask over his mouth, and the last thing that he remembers was this image. And next thing, he came to. He was walking down the highway, and the UFO was above him, departing. Central to a lot of these encounters is some sort of what looks to be a medical procedure, an examination, taking off samples, whatever it is. Not a million miles away, I guess, from what we would do if we were tranquilizing an animal and studying it.
He makes very good points.
Maybe put a tracker in it, release it again.
Right.
Tracker.
Now, so these gentlemen took lie detector tests.
There were at least 2 lie detector tests, and some of these people have had multiple tests. I mean, the truth of it is that some were passed, some were failed, some were inconclusive. I think there's a wider debate to be had about lie detectors anyway. According to various reliable sources, they're not 100% accurate. Some people can beat the system. And of course, if you believe, even if you think lie detectors work, if you believe this happened to you, but it didn't, you will pass. So So it's possible to pass a lie detector test as long as you sincerely believe that this is what happened.
Right. And Travis's story also is another story that's entered into, a certain aspect of American folklore. It's become a story that is told, a movie that is made, a book that is written. It's not scientific, it's not
Have you seen this movie?
It's not
No.
a provable story from the traditional standpoint, but it's there. It's in in the American culture. It's in the American zeitgeist. The story. You've met Travis. What's your impression of him?
He strikes me as being utterly sincere. The other odd thing, which I think lends credibility here, is that Travis is a tough guy. I mean, these are loggers. They don't scare easily, and he was, by all accounts, something of the troublemaker in the group, the real wild, bad boy. And yet, every time I meet him, we talk about this. I look him in the eyes, and I see that same look that you see in the eyes of someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder, and some say that's exactly what he has. A sort of haunted, hunted look. This big, tough logger, and yet this he can't deal with.
Okay, I want to talk about Terry Lovelace. He and his friend...
So that's the Travis Walton story.
Poor guy.
Thoughts? Yeah, wow.
If he could just accept it and realize, hey, they didn't hurt him. Obviously, the only way that he's being hurt is by his thoughts about what happened still, which is what PTSD is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think you're always going to be a little sensitive to whatever it is.
You just feel vulnerable. Yeah, you feel violated, all the above, right? What a story, though. These guys see their friend get knocked out by light, run away, come back, he's gone. They think they murdered him.
Well, they don't think they murdered him, but the police think they murdered him.
And then he shows up 5 days later. There's no explanation of how he survived in the woods alone for 5 days. That would be a struggle in and of itself if this is a made-up story, right?
Yeah.
I imagine the authorities investigated to some degree to see if he was.
Yeah.
But then he comes back and he corroborates the same story. I don't know.
As the guys told.
It's just wild. Is it just an elaborate hoax?
Well, you don't make that kind of stuff up.
I just don't feel like you do.
Other than somebody who's really been messed with under hypnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is possible. Some unethical person could take someone who's really
6 of them
vulnerable to hypnosis, and they could implant this stuff, and they would believe it. That is a possibility.
Is it CIA just messing with minds?
Not the case in this case, obviously, because you have those 5 other guys. How did they get to the 5 other guys if this was implanted?
Exactly.
So, that would have been a major undertaking.
Yeah.
And I think there would have been some record of it somewhere that these 6 guys went to this person who, so it's credible. I think it's
really
very credible.
I don't think
believe it.
Mass hypnosis or mass hysteria, I just don't think those explain this well enough. If it's even possible.
It's not mass. It's individual
6
people who seem to have really had something happen.
It really does seem that way. It's pretty wild. Great story. I wonder why they didn't find any physical evidence of the craft. And then the Betty and Barney Hill story as well. They said they were drugged to a clearing where the craft was waiting for them. They never found any
physical evidence
of that craft.
That's interesting. This one didn't seem like it landed. It just kind of beamed him up.
Yeah, we've had other stories where they found physical evidence of the craft landing pads or whatever.
Yeah, and maybe with the Betty and Barney story, they didn't know to look. Maybe back then.
True.
They didn't investigate it quite that way.
Maybe they didn't have the funding, or maybe they didn't think about doing that, or maybe they didn't know exactly where that clearing was. Yeah, wild stories. Okay, we got another one.
Let's keep going.
All right, let's get back to it.
Friends go camping in 1977, and they see a UFO. They're sitting around and they see a hovering UFO, And here's a sketch of the UFO he claims he and his friends saw. A massive triangle UFO. You can see he drew himself and his friends below in order to convey the scale of this thing. At one point, one of his friends allegedly shined a flashlight onto the craft, and he says the triangle's center light responded by shining a bright beam onto them. And I think Terry thought that's all it was this strange encounter buddies had while camping, until 2012, when he developed, I think he called it a numb spot in his leg. It was a spot where he couldn't feel his finger or anything, and went to get x-rayed. And these are the supposed x-rays that were taken. And he claims doctors found a metal object here in his leg. And the strange thing about the object in his leg is that on the skin outside of the leg, there is no scar tissue, or there's no evidence that something was cut and an object put in, or shrapnel. It would leave a scar of some sort. And outside of his skin, there is absolutely no evidence of an incision, a scar, no scar tissue whatsoever. And Terry wrote a book about his experiences. Let's listen to him tell the story about this discovery.
The radiologist asked, "Mr. Lovelace, I see what looks like a tiny piece of square metal in your right leg, just above your knee." "Doctor, that's news to me," I said. The radiologist carefully examined my knee and lower thigh. After a few minutes, he shook his head and admitted, "I don't see it. It should be right here," he said.
Is it that easy to find a chip in an animal?
What should be right here, I asked. "A point of entry."
When they chip animals.
Well, we're talking lots of fur, right? I mean, I've got scars all over my body from, okay, here's where I cut my thumb with my jackknife when I was doing my paper out. Here's where I took a skate in this thigh. Here's where I took a skate in this thigh. They're still there. 30, 40 years, 50, almost 50, 40 years later.
I realize what you're saying, but if you were a cat and you had gotten in all these fights, you would know where those scars are, but you wouldn't, the chip thing, maybe you had no memory of that because it was so far outside of your thing. You're at the vet, you're freaked out, they give you a chip, right?
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
It is. It really is. Yeah, and then we talked about this earlier in this very podcast, that, tracking devices or whatever, that's how what we would do to animals, dolphins.
Yeah, so this one's already been looked at. Let's see what he does. Let's follow him throughout his life. We are an endangered species, that's for sure.
It seems that way sometimes.
We've endangered ourselves.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
It is that way.
"What do you mean a point of entry?" I asked. "I mean there should be a scar where this piece of metal pierced your skin and entered your thigh." After another 10-minute examination, she reached the same conclusion. There was no scar to be found.
And he discovers this when he's much older in 2012. And much like Betty and Barney and Travis, he claims that in 1977, in this incident, he was abducted by aliens.
I was seeing this play out in my mind. It was familiar. These were real memories. I'm on their table and held down. Then I can't move at all. I'm aware of others around me. They are aliens, not people. I know it's about to start, the examination. They do medical things and hurt me while I'm on the table. I fill my lungs with air to scream, and nothing comes out again.
This guy has an interesting CV. I mean, he was former military, and then he became a prosecutor, and he ended up as Assistant Attorney General in the American Samoa territory. So this is not somebody who you would think would be one just to make up a story like this. You're opening yourself up to a world of hurt and ridicule, which is interesting because, of course, one of the skeptical theories is that these people are attention-seeking, or they're in it for fame and fortune. Well, not sure there's too much fame or a lot of fortune to be had. They're speaking out more because because they're looking for answers, I think. If you have an experience like that, and you genuinely believe you've had that experience, part of you will say, maybe I'm going crazy. Because it's one thing to say that you've seen a UFO, it's quite another to say that you've been on board one.
If you're curious about alien abduction, the validity of it, and you start your search, within a few minutes you're going to realize it's not just like a handful. There are lots and lots and lots of people like Betty and Barney, like Travis, who claim to have had similar experiences. Correct?
Yes, there are.
Absolutely,
Can we pause it
there
here?
are literally thousands.
Hmm.
This would be a good time for you to come clean.
You know, I've been into the UFO stuff a lot for a long time. I've read the books, I've followed it, I've listened to the radio shows, and I think part of it has to do with consciousness. It would explain some things, you know, it would explain how they travel, how they came here, how they interact with us, how they can telepathically communicate with some of the people. And so I remember having a dream,
quotes around
air
dream.
quotes around dream, where there were a couple figures at the foot of my bed, and it felt like they were removing a needle from me. And they said, and I heard, you know, in my head, oh, he's waking up, and then some kind of fuzzy noise, and they were gone. And I just went back to sleep thinking it was a dream, and then maybe it was a dream.
When was this?
You know, I can't even remember specifically when it was. It was in this house, so it had to be within the last 20 years. Yeah.
So let's assume it was 19 years ago. And when you talk about it now, how do you feel?
It weirds me out a little bit, you know, to think that these things were in my house at the foot of my bed. But, you know, it just seems so dreamlike. I can't give it any concrete validity. I can't say for sure it was real. Because I've been following UFOs. I've heard stories like this. You know, it's just all jumbled around in my mind, and I had a weird dream, maybe is all it could have been. I mean, I've had other weird dreams, like you say, slice of life type dreams that seem so real that I'm slapping my hockey stick and hitting the puck and I ram my arm into your leg. You know, it's pretty real to my mind. It could have been something like that.
Well, how do you know it's not real on another plane and it's just leaking through into your dreams?
Well, that's essentially what I'm describing with the hockey.
Okay,
you know,
so
I play hockey. I'm into hockey. I dream about hockey. I follow alien stuff. I'm into alien stuff. I dream about alien stuff.
Okay, I don't know if you were into alien stuff this much before that happened.
Oh, yeah.
Were you?
Big time. Since before I got into the Air Force, I was into alien stuff.
Okay, so will you consider something for me?
Sure.
That you volunteered for that.
Volunteered for what?
You volunteered for that experiment. Your whole life you've been really interested in aliens, and so you were like, hey, yeah, go for it, guys.
If it
Get
even
what
happened,
you need.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
See, this is you, and that's the thing. You are a classic example of someone who doesn't want to believe it because it's too fucking scary to believe that you could be experimented on like we experiment on animals.
You know, maybe I'm laughing it off, treating it as a dream because to think otherwise would be too traumatic. You might be right there. You might be right.
And that's fine.
But you might be wrong, and maybe it was just a dream. It very easily could have just been.
Well, who's to say that dreams are, is this a dream?
Well, exactly.
Could this be a dream?
It's all wrapped up in consciousness. Again, I come back to that.
This could be a dream.
Life is but a dream.
And then you're also trying to deny, and this is scientifically proven how the human brain works, is that when those ships came, when Columbus landed, those indigenous peoples literally could not see them until the people got off. And then when the people were approaching them on the shore, they realized, oh, there's people here, right, that don't look like us. They thought they were aliens or gods, They didn't know what they were. What's the difference? They couldn't see the ships because they had no concept for them in their consciousness.
Fascinating stuff.
So that's why I'm saying ask and you will be shown. Volunteer and you will be taken or experimented on.
Taken sounds pretty scary.
Well, if you volunteer, maybe you volunteer. Everybody doesn't remember volunteering. So maybe some people really were abducted, and that is freaky, but we do it.
Yeah.
So let's try to, I'm trying to normalize it enough that it can actually be a real discussion instead of a urban legend. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little ridiculous that this whole show, they're presenting these things like they're not true because they don't have quote-unquote proof.
Yeah.
So what would proof be in this reality of having yourself experimented on by aliens? What kind of proof would there possibly be?
Well, I like the physical evidence of landing pads in the ground and that's interesting to me. And just better photos, like if those guys...
Photos of someone getting abducted?
Well, why abducted? Why don't you say, hey, how's it going there? You want to come up to our ship and hang out for a minute? We might do some experiments on you, but, we'll treat you all right, and we'll keep you calm by showing you pictures of puppies, and then we'll get you back home before you know it.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we had a way to communicate with animals before we do experiments on them? Maybe they don't really have a good way to communicate with us.
Well, I feel like I can communicate pretty well with my cat, right? I might want the cat to come inside. I say, hey, come on here. Here's some treats. Or, if I have to. I usually don't have to resort to treats, but sometimes I do.
And so, like, when she got taken to the vet to get spayed.
I gave her some treats.
And get her...
Made her cage all comfy. Her travel box, what do you call them? Mm-hmm. Travel carrier.
Yeah, so the blue light was all comfy, and he couldn't move, and all of a sudden he finds himself inside. What's the difference? You think the cat understood, I'm going to the vet and they're going to mess around with my private parts and then they're going to insert this thing into me so they can track me? Does it make sense how similar it is?
It is so similar. Yeah. Okay. Well,
all right.
Let's get back to the show. We're almost done here.
Thousands and thousands of these cases.
And, again, with every one of these cases, there is little to no physical evidence, analyzable evidence. That's not to say I don't want to be insensitive, because in a lot of these cases they believe they were.
Yes.
They believe that the traumatic assault, the traumatic
using these
pain,
words just makes it worse.
Endured the nightmares. They believe, and I believe they believe what they're saying, and that they suffer from something and that they're traumatized by something, and I don't want to minimize that or make fun or berate that, because all of that is serious stuff and should be taken into account when it comes to the well-being of this human being. But there are explanations, psychological and otherwise, that could explain some of alien abductions, basically. And what are some of those kind of overarching, not case by case, but like an overarching explanation?
Well, first of all, right at the top of my answer, I should mention probably the biggest problem with the whole alien abduction phenomenon, and that's the fact that a large amount of this material only comes out after regression hypnosis. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And that's a problem, because there isn't even consensus in the scientific community and the psychological community about what hypnosis is. Is the hypnotic state, for example, is it an altered state of consciousness, or is it just a very focused state of mind? And there's huge disagreement about the validity of regression hypnosis in actually recovering lost memories. And even further than that, there's a suspicion on a large part of the psychological, psychiatric community that not only is it not reliable, it can be counterproductive, and it actually can result in false memories.
It's a flaw.
But you say there are ways for professionals, people that know what they're doing with hypnosis, to avoid that kind of thing. Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah. It's an ethical thing. And what they're doing is they're accusing people of, you go in there and you want to remember an alien abduction. right? As a patient.
specific event. I have these foggy memories.
Yeah, so you go in and you ask about that, and if they're ethical, they're just going to go in and see what your subconscious mind remembers.
Mm-hmm.
Your subconscious mind is a thing. I mean, that's not even in question. These guys are acting like somehow these memories are from something else, and they get twisted into alien memories because they're easier to deal with in that form.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a point. That could happen. That's true. Say someone was abused as a child and it's too painful for them to realize that it was their parents that did it. They could turn it into an alien abduction. Absolutely, that could be the case. But there are so many of these. That might explain a few, but sure as hell not all of them.
Yeah.
You know, some of the people had no other traumatic events in their life, like you.
Right.
Like, where did yours come from?
Well, it's because I was into UFOs, but like the Gulf Breeze documentary.
It's because you asked for it.
Let me.
All right,
okay,
go
the Gulf
ahead.
Breeze documentary. This guy had encounters with aliens, with spaceships, blue light. You know, and they're saying that he was a jokester, he was a prankster, he just hoaxed the whole thing. Well, but they never said he was a guy who was into UFOs, a ufologist, or a guy just curious. Because how did he know about blue lights? I see blue lights all the time in these stories, and freeze rays. I see those all the time.
It's true.
I felt a little paralyzed in my vague,
yes,
vague whatever
which
it was.
matches up. Yeah, your memory.
So, anyway, I don't know where I was going with that now.
Well, it's an altered. I mean, it's an altered state of consciousness that you are in when it happens. Because our reality hasn't opened up to accepting that yet. Could you imagine if all the dogs and cats in the world all of a sudden got conscious enough that they could say no to all the crap we do to them?
Well, I was going to say, too, when they talked about traumatic experiences, are we traumatizing our pets by doing what we do to them? Spaying and neutering and vet
see
visits
dogs
and
on these short leashes, and they stay on those leashes all day, and they bark and bark, and there's a trail of where they run back and forth.
And pinch collars and other things like that. It's like...
if we can open up our reality and realize that there are other beings out there that are very interested in us, we could maybe join with the authority that is managing them from the other side and find a way to stop these abductions from happening, because they are traumatic for people that have not asked for them. And if we can get my friend on the show, she was very traumatized by her abduction.
Wow. And she's probably one of the most mentally strong people I know.
Yeah. So I don't know if she'll be willing to come on our show.
You haven't
I'll talk to her.
approached her yet.
I'll have to talk to her about it. I'll talk to her before we do our next podcast. How does that sound?
That sounds like a deal. Let's finish this one up before we can here. We've got about 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Odd approach.
It is.
And
I mean, even
suggestible. You could almost plant memories that weren't there before.
Yes, a lot of people are extremely suggestible under hypnosis. Now, there are various other things that have been postulated in relation to alien abduction. There was a theory doing the rounds, for example, that there's something called birth trauma, that we have suppressed traumatic memories of the birth experience. And
yes. I was talking about this the other day about, when you're born as a baby, your vision is very blurred and blown out and distorted. And how you would view your mother, essentially your mother's face, would be a big head, and the eyes would seem really big, and even the...
What do you think about that theory? I think that's fascinating. I don't have any memories at all before like 5 years old, I think, maybe 4. To think that I can remember my birth is buried somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Well,
it's an interesting theory.
You're conscious when you're born.
I guess, yeah.
But
I've never
I don't
heard
think
that
my
theory.
mom would look like an alien. Sorry, guys. She looked like a human because that's what she was.
Interesting. That's funny.
No, I can't right now consciously remember when I was 2 days old, any memories. Those are in there. Somewhere in your brain are those images.
And they are,
buried,
that's true.
And accessing those images of the big head and the blown out eyes is a possibility, an explanation that
I think it's a stretch.
that fear, being outside of your element, and being in a white room, and people being prodded and poked and cut and snipped and all of this stuff,
That
One
does
of the
happen to babies.
explanations that's been suggested is sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis, under which you can sometimes get these incredibly vivid dreams, hallucinations that probably seem as real as you and I sitting here talking to each other now.
Right.
So,
and this is sleep paralysis is an observable, studyable phenomenon that occurs.
Moving on to another theory, let's not kid ourselves that there isn't a sexual element to this. And this takes us to difficult and controversial territory, but there's no denying, for example, that obviously when you look at the alien abduction narrative, a lot of it seems to involve, being probed, having samples taken, whether it's sperm or ova. And again, there's no denying that some people do have, I guess you would call them forced fantasies in which they are held down, disempowered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could this be manifesting itself in some way? People who perhaps don't want to admit to those fantasies, but maybe if they dress it up as something else, all this has to go into the pot. When we're casting the net and saying, what are we dealing with here? Because in one sense, being taken by extraterrestrials should be our last theory. So always we have to ask ourselves here, are there conventional explanations? And some of them may be a little bit dark side.
Yeah, I guess the closest thing to physical evidence will be things like Terry's X-ray. But most of the objects that are pulled from these people who claim they're...
Go in there and get that damn thing.
Yeah, let's study it. Hello.
What the heck? Did they leave it in there? I mean, I want to see it.
I know, and
Show
it's
me
interesting
pictures.
that they don't say anything
Talk about physical evidence. There it is, right there. Go get it.
Why don't you take it out? I wonder why they're not talking about that. That might be something for you to research.
Yeah.
See if you can find it out. And I was also going to say that movie that you were referring to, or the documentary.
Yes.
Let's post the link to that.
Well, I think we might.
What was it called again? The Ghost?
It's a documentary about the Florida breeze sighting when they had 200 people see these ships, and these guys said it was a little bit too real, or too. The pictures were really good, and they had the light over the road. Remember, and we were like, "Oh, there's no way they could have faked that light over the road." Blah blah blah.
Oh, so we've already posted the link to that.
They discussed it on this show, and I saw it's Gulf Breeze, Florida Gulf Breeze UFO sighting. Yeah, they discussed it on the show.
Breeze.
Of all the UFOs we've discussed on the show, that was the one they poo-pooed off maybe easier than any of the others. And after seeing the documentary, it started out, I started believing it more, and then toward the end I started believing it less, and it's in that gray zone. But like I was saying a minute ago, the fact that he described this blue light and these other things he described, and yeah, maybe he was a jokester, but he wasn't the UFO guy, almost makes me believe it more that it was true. And plus he has all these other witnesses that saw it too.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So have you posted the link to that one?
No.
Why don't you do that in case anybody wants to watch it?
Yeah, I guess I can post it in the description box below this post. Yeah, that documentary is over an hour long. For us to sit here and do what we're doing now to it, it probably wouldn't work.
I'm just suggesting if someone were interested, you should post the link.
I think you should watch it, and then maybe we could discuss it.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a good idea.
That might work, but anyway, yeah. Let's see if we can wrap this up here.
Okay.
They're not getting Matrix robots out of their skin or anything like that. I haven't really seen anything groundbreaking out of these implants or whatever.
Well, I've seen some of these implants. I've seen there are a couple of researchers who specialize in this aspect, and they say that this is the smoking gun. And my response is always, look, if it is the smoking gun, get someone to write it up in Science or Nature, get it peer-reviewed and published. And look, for anyone that says, well, the scientific community in on the conspiracy, nonsense. Someone would win a Nobel Prize off that.
They 100, yeah. If this thing that I pulled from my skin turned out to be not terrestrial, not human-made, containing materials not found on Earth, and this was analyzed and published in a scientific paper, yeah, then we can revisit this phenomenon with actual, like, hard evidence and, you know, spin the heads of millions of people who thought this was all bunk. But until then, like, we don't have anything besides some really awesome, scary movies.
See, he's laughing it off.
He goes over and he puts his hand, runs his hand in front of my eyes, and he says, "I'll be all right. I won't feel it." And all the pain goes away.
To accept alien abduction as real is understandably hard to swallow, but our own history is full of hard-to-swallow truths. The government performing medical experiments on unsuspecting people, forced sterilizations, the MK-Ultra program, mind control programs. Again, people had no idea that they were being used in this way for a CIA program. And Operation Paperclip, where Nazi scientists were granted immunity in the name of science. The list goes on. These are very dark truths that were kept from the public for decades. So if it's now being revealed that more and more UFOs are real, that the intelligence behind them might be non-human, is it really a bridge too far to suggest that something that mirrors our dark history might in fact be happening today? That all those scary movies and TV shows might just be based on something that's really happening?
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, I like Nick Pope a lot. He's showed up in a couple other videos I've seen on YouTube, and whenever I see his face, I'm like, okay, I'll watch that one because I know it's going to be somewhat legit because Nick wouldn't just do bunk, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of the stuff out there, UFO stuff, is like crazy and weird and just like whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And he makes very good points.
Wow, pretty intense. That's pretty interesting stuff, man. Maybe we're not alone, and maybe the aliens aren't exactly what are, like, you know, we think they would be. Like,
conceptualized.
Where did little green men come from? None of the aliens that people describe are actually green. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe some of them were wearing green
jumpsuits.
clothes.
They all seem to be wearing these jumpsuits, which is interesting.
Yeah.
These one-piece coverall things, because I don't know why that would be, but maybe they're spacesuits, or maybe they're
uniform.
They put them on just so that they're not running around naked and a little less trauma for us. I don't know.
Well,
but you know, I just a part of me thinks maybe they don't exist in this physical reality like we typically see objects in physical reality the way we understand it. And maybe they exist in our consciousness, subconsciousness, in consciousness in general.
Well, obviously they exist in this physical reality because we have physical evidence of them landing and stuff like that, right? And possibly a body.
Very little.
You know, and possibly a wreckage, right?
Yeah.
If you believe that that stuff is true.
Yeah.
Right? And we have physical evidence. The fact of the matter is we are in denial. The human race, in my opinion, is in denial over this. And our denial is so strong that we are literally, most of us, unable to see it.
I struggle with it myself, and I've had some
And you've
things.
had your experience.
I've had some experiences, and I still struggle with it. Did I dream that? Is it real?
So
what is
fence-wise, okay, here we are. And how many more? This is the
last one. This is no more Basement Office episodes. You guys have made it.
Where
Woo!
are you, mister, on your fence? What side of the fence are you on now? Let's give us your conclusion there,
man.
Joe.
I think I really want to believe aliens are real. I mean, I think there's, on the one hand, there's enough evidence out there to say, look, it's kind of silly to, with all this, all these witnesses, all these events, all these happenings, to say that they don't exist. But on the other hand, the physical evidence is so lacking and so little.
It's so hidden.
It's hard to say beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's true.
Why is it hard? Just asking.
Because lack of physical evidence, I guess, when it comes right down to it. Those indigenous people saw these ships or couldn't see the ships, but then when they had the come ashore boats and actually were on their shore, walking up to them, then they could see them. And then when they started ravaging their land, then they could see them.
Exactly. And
maybe
when
that's what it's going to
abduct
take.
us, then
maybe
we
that's
can
what
see
it's going
them.
to take. Maybe it's going to take more Air Force encounters, and maybe it's going to take the aliens shooting down one of our planes, or our plane shooting down one of theirs, and then we're actually having the physical evidence that it's undeniable, provided the government will even share it with us.
So you're basically asking for a war between the aliens and the humans.
I'm asking for physical evidence. Maybe the physical evidence exists and they're just not sharing it with us for whatever reason.
There we go.
There's got to be mounds of classified data. If this is the unclassified data, there's got to be more that's classified that's better, you would think. I mean, pilots have cell phones, they have cameras. If they're laying eyeballs on these things, there's got to be better pictures out there.
So where are you fence-wise? You've danced around it.
I'm still on the fence.
Still on the fence.
I could say they exist. Sure, fine. I mean, but if you want to see proof, I don't have it. All I have is stories and encounters and dreams and whatnot.
Okay. Got it. This was a really good show, and this was a good series.
It really is.
Are we going to continue? We'll discuss it after we watch that movie.
After you watch the documentary, if you want to do a Gulf Breeze episode, with me, okay, we can probably do that.
We don't have to do it online.
Yeah, I don't think
we can discuss it.
Yeah.
We'll watch it and not discuss it until afterwards. That's the trick.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's, we want to maybe try to move on from UFOs stuff because, we could make this show nothing but a UFO show. That would be easy enough. But it gets old after a while, and there's other things we want to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll try to invite my friend so that when we do the next episode, which will probably be our last alien episode for now,
probably won't happen
we'll be
until
able
the
to
fall.
say, hey, this is scheduled for the fall, or this isn't going to work out, type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
But I would love to talk to her, whether it's on the podcast or not, about this stuff.
Yes, I agree.
Maybe we could just talk to her and then have a podcast where we talk about
what we talked
discussion.
about.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds good. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us today. That was a good final episode of the Basement Office about aliens.
My thanks.
Alien abductions.
My thanks to the New York Post, Nick Pope, and Stephen Greenstreet. Great show they put on. And, UFOs, UAPs, USOs. I saw a really good video on USOs the other day that I want to share with you.
All right. It sounds fun.
And, till next time.
The quest continues.